occasion. And of course, I have to mention, I had a little bet with one of my friends at Channel 7, Ross Jones, a producer there. I had to give him a shout out if Michigan State won, because in July or something, when reality hadn't quite sunk in yet, I told him there was no way that Michigan State would come into the Big House and win. There you go, Ross. I hope you're happy. All right, let's move on to the national scene. Let's talk about some very interesting things that are happening. Let's start in the West of the Mississippi, the Big 12. Well, not everyone's west of the Mississippi. Someone can correct me on my geography. This is, I think, the best conference I have seen in recent memory.
I wouldn't go so far as to say the best conference ever, or the best, and even the best conference in recent memory. That could be up in the air as well. But they've proven themselves as being the best conference this year by far. Every team in the Big 12 is consistent. They're winning big against teams from other conferences, and they're showing that they can play power football on a high level against anybody. Doesn't matter where they are in the nation. That right there makes them definitely the best conference this season, and you could make a point for seasons past, but I wouldn't jump to those conclusions quite yet.
Number 1, Texas. Number 6, Texas Tech. Number 9, Oklahoma State. Number 14, Missouri. Kansas was a decent team as well, and then you have Nebraska and Colorado who are resurgent, which is a very interesting thing. But speaking of Texas, there's going to be a big game that we're going to talk about here in just a second. Texas and Texas Tech in Lubbock. There should be some points scored in that one for certain. But let's talk about Texas. Will they be beat the rest of the season?
I don't think so. I love what Texas is doing on offense and defense. In every phase of their game, they are doing exactly what coaches plan out for their teams during the season. Colt McCoy is a leader at quarterback. He's making important throws when it counts. He's comfortable in the pocket. He's comfortable on the run. He's comfortable in making things up as he goes along to help his team when they need it most. And they haven't struggled yet this season. They've proven they've gone in wherever they play, whatever team they're playing against. They're comfortable enough with themselves and the talent that they have to continue to win and win well. They're not getting lucky. No one's saying, oh, they just barely won that game or they won on this call or that call. They're proving that when they win, they deserve to win, and I think they're going to do so from here on out.
Even in the Big 12 championship game.
It'll be their toughest challenge of the season, but I still feel that Texas will have the momentum from the rest of the games they play this season. I just don't feel like anyone else in the nation has enough consistency through all 4 quarters and all 3 phases of play to hold with Texas for an entire game. So that's
all right. Well, fair enough. So, that Texas and Texas Tech game is definitely one to watch this weekend, but also the biggest cocktail party, I'm messing up the name of that, biggest cocktail party in the world, Georgia and Florida playing as well. That's a great one to watch as well. But moving on, let's move the focus back to the Big Ten, and we're going to start first on the recruiting trail. Quickly, 2 very great updates to give you. First, Bryce McNeil, that 4-star wide receiver we talked about 2 weeks ago, who I mentioned, what a great sign that Shavadrick Beaver and Bryce McNeil are speaking to each other. They're developing a rapport already. That's great. Well, Bryce McNeil decommitted and then said on his Facebook page, there's no way he's going to Michigan. So that's not a great news. And also, there's a kicker that we had, Anthony Farah, right, who decommitted and on the day of the Michigan-Penn State game, just hugged Joe Pa and said that he was going to go to Penn State. So great news on the recruiting trail as well. But let's take a look at the Big Ten. Lots of interesting things happening. And one of the most interesting, and I don't know if this is a fair question, but I made it, so I'm going to ask it anyway. Ohio State, they're at 7-2. Of course, Penn State beat them last weekend in Columbus, 13-6. Is Terrell Pryor underachieving?
I don't think so. I don't think he's underachieving at all. In fact, the fact that he's starting for the Buckeyes, the fact that he's been playing in so many games up to this point, I think he's doing more than anyone thought he was going to do coming into the season. Part of his quote-unquote reasoning for going to Ohio State over Michigan was that he said he didn't want to be relied on as the starter. He didn't want to be thrown into a program where he was going to have to put them on their back and carry them through. And he's been doing that at Ohio State because they needed him. They were lacking in offensive production. He gave them a spark. He's done things for them that their other quarterbacks and their former offense weren't going to be able to do without his skill in running and passing on the run and such like that. He had a bad game against a great team in Penn State. You cannot say that is underachieving.
Well, yeah, I would agree. Just with the run-up to his commitment to, as it was, the University of Ohio State, You definitely thought he was the second coming, and I guess perhaps he's not, or at least not this year. But yes, as a true freshman, even at home, it's just interesting to see Buckeye fans very upset and up in arms about a team that's 7-2. I mean, who knows? Maybe one day they'll be 2-6 and maybe have a little bit different perspective on things. 7-2 is not the end of the world, college football fans. So let's take a look at the Big Ten standings. Some interesting things happened last week. You had Wisconsin beating Illinois, something Wisconsin coming back from the dead after their last-second losses to Michigan and Ohio State, and then just the shellacking that Penn State put on them. And you see Michigan State up there, Ohio State ahead because they beat Michigan State head-to-head. But very surprising that Michigan State is up there, of course. Just not the normal trend of things. But let's talk about Penn State. Penn State is the number 3 team in the country, behind right now Texas, number 1, and Alabama, number 2. We have a great system called the BCS that determines, no sarcasm in my voice, that determines who plays in the national championship game. Because we can't have a playoff because academics are important. So, I'm sorry, I can't even say that with a straight face. Is Penn State Rose Bowl bound? And by asking that question, I'm not asking if they're going to win out. I'm asking if they win out, and so does Texas and Alabama, do they deserve to be screwed out of the national championship game?
No, I definitely don't think so. And people are going to say, oh, well, Penn State plays in a lesser conference. The Big Ten is down this year. Well, that's bull. Because that does not mean, just because they're playing in a lesser conference, they're soundly beating the opponents in the Big Ten. Does not make their team any less talented than those other teams, Alabama, even Texas. I still think Texas is number 1 in the nation, but I still think Penn State is number 2. They have talent all across the board. They're playing consistently well. They had a bad first half against Michigan, but unlike Michigan, when they play one horrendous quarter that loses them the entire football game, Penn State goes into the locker room, regroups, come back, and just shellacks the Wolverines at home. Again, I feel Penn State, if they go to the Rose Bowl, it will be a disservice not only to them, but to college football in general, because that just shows how incredibly flawed this system is.
A small part of me is going to die when I say this, but the SEC and the Big 12 are so much better than the Big 10 that if Penn State is an undefeated number 3 and Alabama and Texas are both undefeated as well, with their conference championship games, there's no way that a Big 10 team this year deserves to be in there. Oh my God. I should work for ESPN. That's all they say all the time. Well, we have to move the focus on to Michigan and Purdue, but we're going to talk about the most important thing, and Larissa White is going to tell you a little bit more about whether or not Michigan can keep that bowl streak alive, and of course, it depends on a win at Purdue this Saturday.
Well, you heard him. Back to you guys at the studio.
Well, there you have it. People on campus perhaps a little bit more optimistic about Michigan's bowl chances a week ago or so than they are now. So quickly, we're running out of time. First, will Michigan make a bowl game? And then, of course, you're going to say no. So the next question becomes, will Michigan win another game this season? And could it be at West Lafayette?
They will win another game this season. They're going to go into Purdue because Purdue is as bad or worse as the Wolverines are this year. I feel like they're going to get their stuff together. They played 3 solid quarters of football against Michigan State. Look for them to finally play 4 for the first time this season against Purdue and get their first win. That could be the last one they get for the rest of the season, but they'll win at least one more.
There's something about that Purdue offense that always seems to go well with the Michigan defense, even though it is the spread attack and even though West Lafayette is the cradle of quarterbacks, according to Joe Tiller. But
Michigan's won 5 in a row against the Boilermakers. They own a 41-12 series lead against them all time. It'll be the 1,200th football game Michigan will have played in its storied program, so they're going to get a win.
Well, there's been a lot of history that's been chucked out the window this year, Caitlin. I definitely hope you're right. I will go on the record as predicting Michigan victory as well, which I'm always wrong about Michigan, so that means they're going to lose. I'm sorry. I apologize. Well, that does it for this week of Varsity Blue. I'm Alex Prasad alongside Caitlin Nurka. I want to thank Caitlin for joining us with just
Thanks for having me.
two-man and a woman show. Geez, I'm messing up all over the place this week.
Breaking down gender barriers all over the place.
Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned next week where we'll hopefully be talking about a Michigan victory.